Everyone in the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood of River Heights knew the tall, gray mansion on the hill. It was owned by James Whitmore, a stern-faced millionaire whose name often appeared in newspapers and business magazines. The mansion, though, grand and elegant, carried an eerie stillness that kept people away. No one lingered near its iron gates for too long. No children dared to trick-or-treat there during Halloween. James Whitmore was a widower. His wife, Eliza, had passed away tragically 5 years ago in a car accident, leaving behind 2 children twins, Noah and Natalie, who were barely 3 at the time. Since then, James had buried himself in work, managing his empire of real estate holdings and tech companies, while his children were left in the care of one nanny after another. But strangely, none of them lasted. In the 5 years since Eliza's death, James had hired and fired over a dozen nannies. Some left without warning. Others broke down in tears after just a few days. A few even left in the middle of the night. The longest anyone lasted was 2 weeks. The twins, now 8, were notorious in the neighborhood. Rumors flew. Some said they were possessed. Others said they were wild and cruel, and a few claimed the house was cursed. But no one really knew what went on behind those towering gates. It all changed one spring morning when Delilah Brown walked into the mansion for an interview. Delilah was not like the other applicants. She was a middle-aged black woman from the southern side of town, raised on faith, hard work, and community. She had a wide smile, calloused hands, and eyes that saw through people like glass. For 20 years, she had worked as a cleaner, a cook, a caregiver, whatever job helped pay the bills. But she'd never worked for someone like James Whitmore. The butler, it's an old man named Arthur, eyed her curiously when she arrived. "Are you sure you want this job?" he asked quietly as he led her into the study. "Most don't stay. I go where the good Lord sends me," Delilah said calmly, "and today he sent me here." James Whitmore looked up from his laptop when Delilah entered. His eyes, gray and sharp, scanned her from head to toe. He said little during the interview, simply asked if she had experience with children, if she could handle discipline, if she was available to start immediately. "I raised 3 boys of my own," Delilah said with a quiet confidence. 2 are in college, 1's in the army. I think I can handle 2 more. James nodded without much emotion. "You start tomorrow." That night, Arthur sighed as he prepared the guest room. "She won't last," he muttered. "No one ever does." The next morning, Delilah woke before sunrise, dressed in her plain cotton blouse and long skirt, tied her apron neatly, and walked to the children's room. She knocked once before entering. Noah and Natalie sat silently on their beds, eyes wide. And curious, they were pale with ash-blonde hair and the same piercing gray eyes as their father. There was something unnatural in the way they stared, expressionless, distant. But Delilah was not afraid. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "My name's Miss Delilah. I'm going to take care of you now." Noah didn't respond. Natalie narrowed her eyes and whispered, "You'll be gone by the weekend." Delilah chuckled. "Is that so? We'll see about that." The first day was quiet. The children refused to speak. They ignored her instructions. They didn't eat. They didn't play. They just watched her. On the second day, Delilah found her suitcase dumped in the hallway, its contents soaked in water. She calmly cleaned up the mess and said nothing. That afternoon, she discovered sugar in the gas tank of her car. Still, she said nothing. On the third day, she entered the dining room to find Natalie screaming and Noah throwing plates at the wall. Glass shattered around her feet. James appeared a few minutes later, fuming. "This is what happens every time," he muttered, dragging his children away. "You can leave. Arthur will pay you for the week." Delilah didn't leave. She swept up the broken glass, fixed dinner, and waited for the children to calm down. Later that night, she sat outside their room and hummed an old gospel song until they fell asleep. Something began to change in the days that followed. When Natalie refused to eat, Delilah didn't scold her. She simply sat beside her and started eating her own meal. She'd hum softly between bites, tell small stories about her childhood, about picking peaches in Georgia or riding in her father's pickup truck. Slowly, Natalie began nibbling her food, when Noah locked himself in the bathroom and refused to come out. Delilah sat outside the door and told him about her son Marcus, who used to do the same thing when he was angry. She didn't plead or threaten, just talked. After 30 minutes, the door creaked open. By the second week, the twins were brushing their teeth on time, getting dressed without a fight, even smiling occasionally. One evening, James returned home early and found Delilah sitting on the floor of the playroom, telling the twins a story about the stars. The children were laughing, real loud, joyful laughter. He stood frozen at the door, stunned. "I don't understand," he said later, as Delilah brought him tea in the study. "They've never behaved this way." Delilah sat across from him, her expression calm. "Children act out when they're hurt, when they're not heard. These two," she paused, "they've been grieving, not just for their mama, but for their daddy too." James flinched. "I've been doing my best." "No," she said gently but firmly. "You've been running from pain, from responsibility. You hired help to raise them, but what they needed was you." James didn't respond, stared down at his cup, silent. Weeks turned into months. The mansion, once cold and hollow, slowly filled with warmth. Delilah baked bread on weekends, let the children paint in the garden, and brought music back into the house. She taught Natalie to braid her hair, helped Noah build a birdhouse, made sure the children wrote letters to their mother every Sunday. They placed the letters in a small wooden box under the rose bush Eliza once planted. James, too, began to change. Started coming home earlier, joining them for dinner, reading bedtime stories. Under Delilah's quiet guidance, he remembered how to be a father again. One rainy afternoon, James walked into the kitchen and found Delilah crying softly. It was the anniversary of her husband's death. She had never spoken of him before. "I was 29 when he died," she said quietly. "Heart attack. Left me with 3 little boys and a broken heart, but I never let it harden me." James sat beside her. For the first time, they shared their pain not as employer and maid, but as two people who had survived loss. Rumors about the twins' transformation spread quickly through the neighborhood. People whispered in amazement about the mysterious maid who had done what no one else could. Porters even contacted James for interviews, but he declined. "This isn't a story for the papers," he said. "It's a story for the heart." A year later, on the same spring morning, Delilah first walked through the mansion's doors. James surprised everyone by hosting a garden party, his first social event in over a decade. The guests were stunned to see the twins laughing, running, barefoot in the grass, and hugging a smiling Delilah as if she were family. Someone asked James, "Who is she really?" He smiled. "She's the miracle we never knew we needed." Delilah never saw herself as a miracle. She was just a woman who believed in love, patience, and the healing power of presence. But to Noah and Natalie, she was more than a nana. She was a mother, a protector, a guide, and to James, she was a reminder that sometimes the most unbelievable things are the simplest. A soft voice in a loud world, steady hand in a storm, and the courage to stay when everyone else walks away.